A strengths-based approach to family therapy. The Ohio State University College of Social Work. When a child or adolescent exhibits behavior that is experienced as problematic by their parents and other adults, they are usually viewed as having something wrong with them, that the problem is due to some psychopathology that resides within them. Often, when this occurs, the young person is taken to a mental health professional where they are given a diagnosis and perhaps individual psychotherapy. In social work practice, we are advised to take a person-in-environment approach when working with clients. That is, positive change or problem resolution is more likely to occur when intervening with the person, their environment, and the interactions between the person and their environment. In working with young people with problems, research is now supporting the benefits of working with the family, especially the parents or parent figures together with the young person. From this family system's perspective, the family is the client and not just the individual young person who has the identified problem. From this perspective, then, we can get more accomplished in a shorter period of time by working with the child or adolescent with the presenting problem and their parents, parent figures, or other adults with whom they are in regular contact together rather than separately. Many families who become clients of clinical social workers have multiple problems and have had these problems for a long period of time. Clients such as this have been referred to as having problem-saturated stories. Humans are storytelling beings. We tell and retell stories about our lives, the lives of others, to organize our lives and to make meaning of them. If clients have multiple problems and have been diagnosed with a mental disorder, then the primary stories they tell and are told about them, especially by professionals in the social and mental health services, are about their problems and diagnoses. The presumption, then, is that these clients have psychopathology residing within them. They suffer from cognitive distortions, dysfunctional thoughts, irrational thinking, and they are seriously lacking in skills of living, such as problem-solving skills, interpersonal skills, anger management skills, etc. What professionals and clients themselves often overlook are the strengths or the competencies, skills, and assets clients already have. In recent years, a growing body of research and scholarship is supporting the importance of clinicians focusing primarily on identifying and amplifying the strengths of families rather than trying to remediate their deficits or correct their cognitive distortions and or teach them skills. This video is a demonstration of how to combine family systems perspective and a focus on client strengths to solve a presenting problem and finding solutions for a 16-year-old adolescent. The family in this video is a composite of many families with whom Dr. Susan Salzberg and Dr. Gil Green have worked with over the years.
Thank you for coming. Please be comfortable, and I hope you found the office okay.
Yeah, the directions were clear.
The therapist is beginning the process of connecting with the family and helping them feel at ease and welcome in the therapy process. In strengths-based therapies, the therapist strives to become acquainted with the family members and engage them in social conversation about their lives before moving into talking about problems or solutions. During this joining process, the practitioner engages the family as a collaborator in their work together.
Obviously, we don't know each other, but it says from the brief intake sheet here that Bill, is it okay to call you Bill?
Yeah, please call me Bill.
And you can call me Jane, and this is our son, Joe.
It's nice to meet all of you. It says here, Bill, that you are 45 and work construction. Is that correct?
That's right, but I'm not working right now.
Oh, so you're currently not working in construction?
No, there's just no work out there. It's the economy. Things are hard for everybody these days.
That must be very difficult. especially when you have the experience and the skills for that sort of work.
Tell me about
It says here, Jane, that you are 35 and a waitress. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Fortunately, I still have a job. I've worked at the same restaurant for the past 7 years, and before that, I've waitressed at several other restaurants in town over the years.
You must enjoy that kind of work. A people person.
Yeah, I do, and it's what I know.
It says here, Joe, that you're 16 and a junior in high school. Is that correct?
Yeah,
What high school do you go to?
Harriet Tubman High School.
How's school going?
So.
What's your favorite part of school?
Not much.
Do you have a favorite subject?
He's always really liked reading and writing and has written some really good things, especially poetry.
Wow, that takes a lot of creativity to write poetry. It's a unique art form. I'd like to hear more about your poetry writing.
Well, not only is he not doing that, he's not doing a lot of other things. Like he hasn't even been going to school much for the past few months.
Yes.
Here you have a kid who's good at school, smart, and he won't go.
That's what it says here on the intake sheet. But other than that, I don't really know the situation with school. So what's going on that you'd want to come and see someone like me?
The therapist does not immediately focus on the father's concerns with an overly serious or knowing response, but rather turns to the family as a whole to fill him in on the concerns they want to address in therapy. In asking the question in this way, the therapist conveys to the family that he is open to hearing their take on what is going on and comes to the session with no preconceived assumptions or hypotheses. Asking the question this way attempts to begin the process of co-constructing change with the family, that they are people who have or can have a sense of personal agency.
Well, Bill and I, we're really worried about Joe. We're really upset. He's changed in the past several months. It seems like things are just getting worse.
How so?
Well, as we just said, he doesn't want to go to school anymore. It's a struggle to get him up in the morning and get ready for school. I set his alarm clock and he turns it off. I go in and start trying to wake him up and he just ignores me. Then I try pulling off the covers and coaxing him out of bed, but all he wants to do is sleep in the mornings and be left alone. Most mornings, I can eventually get him up, but there are some mornings when I just have to leave him in bed because I have to get to work. And on those days, he usually just stays home all day and misses school. And I've been late too many times as it is. Every morning is a battle, leaving me out of sorts before I even leave the house, and then upset when I'm at work, and I'm the only one who has to deal with it. It's getting to the point now where he's missed a lot of school and we're getting calls and pressure from the school to get him there. And his grades have gone downhill from A's and B's to D's and F's.
Sounds like a very stressful way to begin everyone's day. Is this something new, or has Joe always been someone who likes to sleep in?
Well, he's never been an early bird, if that's what you mean, but not wanting to go to school and stay in bed all day, yeah, that is new. He didn't used to be that way. And he also doesn't care about being with his friends anymore. He just seems really detached from everything.
Bill, what's your take on the situation with Joe?
Jane's pretty much said it. We're really worried about him, but we don't know what to do. Everything's a struggle these days.
So what do you do on those mornings when Jane has to leave Joe in bed in order to get to work on time?
Nothing, really. I figure if Jane can't get Joe up, Joe isn't going to get up for me.
Joe, What about you? What do you think's going on?
I don't know. It's like, what's the use of talking about it? I just don't care about anything.
It sounds like giving up has taken control of your life and is with you today at our meeting.
What do you mean?
Well, it sounds like you're saying giving up has taken all the good and enjoyable things out of your life. What do you think? Does this sound like what's happening?
This is the beginning of the process of externalizing the problem. Externalizing is the process of using language to separate the problem from the person by placing the problem's location outside the person. We do this by personifying or objectifying the problem in such a way that we look to highlight how the problem is creating interference in the person's and family's life as a force external to them, to whom they are as people. Doing this communicates that the person isn't the problem, but rather the problem is the problem.
I don't know.
Mom and Dad, what is your take on the situation?
You mean like Joe is so depressed that he's feeling hopeless?
Yes, like hopelessness has taken all the good out of Joe's life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I guess I get what you mean. Like, Joe used to like to go to school and write poetry and be involved in things, and now it seems like something has taken that away from him.
What sort of specific things is hopelessness interfering with in Joe's life?
Well, for one thing, Joe and I used to talk to each other all the time about all kinds of things, like what's going on in Joe's life and what's going on in mine. And we also had a couple of favorite TV shows that we used to watch together, but we don't do any of those things anymore. He stays in his room most of the time. You know, I've tried many times to get him to come out of his room to talk to me or just watch TV together, but nothing seems to work now. His interest and energy seem zapped, and I really don't know what to do anymore.
Once problems are externalized in the therapeutic conversation, we can develop storylines that depict how the problem has had negative effects on persons' and families' lives. Helping people think about how the problem is keeping them from having healthy, happy lives aids them in thinking about ways to free themselves from the problem's influences and destruction. Remember, both mother and father have stated all of the activities that Joe used to do and is no longer doing. So we are building our externalizing conversation on understanding the effects of the problem on Joe and the family as a whole. This is called mapping the effects of the problem on the person and the family. The more we learn about the effects of the problem, the more we are deconstructing the problem story. Also, asking what effect has the problem had on you, rather than how does that make you feel, is more likely to reinforce a sense of personal agency for them individually and as a family.
Before you noticed them zapped from Joe, how did interest and energy fill his life?
Oh, he used to be interested in all kinds of things going on in the world, like homelessness and the environment. Things like that he used to write about in his poetry and volunteer at school to help with these causes.
Joe and Bill, how do you view hopelessness having interfered with your relationship with Joe?
Well, Joe has always been sort of a daddy's boy. We always had this certain special relationship. We used to do funny things, and Jane would call us the two goofballs and look at us funny. I was always the one that was able to get Joe to laugh, to get him from not being so serious about life. Because he's sort of a serious kid. He would take the problems in the newspaper, you know, the problems of the world to heart. I was the one that was always try to get to his sillier side. But we haven't done much joking around lately. Haven't even gone to see a movie together. I guess that what you would call hopelessness has changed all that. There's a part of me that thinks that maybe we're all feeling a little hopeless.
Does that include you as well, Bill?
Yes, it does. Especially me. I've been pretty discouraged about not finding work.
Would it be all right if I asked you a few questions about feeling discouraged?
Before moving forward with this line of questioning, the therapist wants to see if this is all right with the parent. The family came in identifying Joe as having the problem. As the session progresses, the systemic nature of family problems is emerging. In striving to respect people's right to discuss what it is they want to focus on in therapy, the strengths-based therapist asks Father if it is okay to continue with this line of questioning. The therapist is continuing to take a non-hierarchical position in the relationship with the clients.
Yeah, sure.
I'm wondering, Bill, if you're feeling discouraged because you don't believe you're going to find a job, or because you don't believe you have the skills, or is there something else teaming up with hopelessness that's keeping you feeling so low?
Well, it's a lot of things. I'm supposed to be the man of the house. I'm supposed to provide for my family, and I've let them down. It's the bills, the stress on Jane. I can't see how I can't even motivate myself to try to do anything about it. It's just I don't see how this is ever going to get better.
That does sound very difficult. You've got both hopelessness and guilt beating you up at the same time. Do you ever think about trying to escape their grasp?
This validates the father's experiences. In addition, it opens up space in the conversation for the family, especially the parents, to identify times when they may resist the influence of the problem on their lives. The therapist notes these acts of self-agency.
It's all just so frustrating. It's just I can't take it anymore. I don't see how it's ever going to change. I can't. It's just so.
See, it's hard to feel good when Dad still can't find a job and they're both so stressed about bills all the time. I mean, what is it to feel good about?
Joe, what is hopelessness trying to tell you as you see it taking over your dad's life?
Well, when I think about how my dad's situation is being experienced by a lot of people because of how the economy sucks, it's like this hopelessness is just getting louder and louder.
What messages are getting louder and louder through hopelessness? What is it saying?
Like it's no use. Like I might as well not have any plans or dreams because it's not going to happen.
That sounds very scary. I'm wondering if hopelessness, what is hopelessness saying to you as well, Dad? As I sit here with all of you, I'm wondering if hopelessness has found a way to wedge itself into your family and affect the family as a whole, not just Joe. Does hopelessness take away your hopes for the future as well?
When we are engaged in externalizing conversations, we are looking to name and define the problem as an external force, map the effects of the problem on the lives of the family members, and evaluate the effects of the problems. In doing this, we are building a scaffold from which to begin to construct the alternative storyline or exceptions to the problem.
Sure does.
What do you think it would take to tune out the pessimism of hopelessness?
I don't know.
So let me ask you, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is where hopelessness has completely taken control of your life and is interfering with your relationships with each other, and 10, where hopelessness is completely gone and you are filled with hope, where would you say that you are on that 0 to 10 scale?
Scaling questions can help the family place a measurable value on a scale from 0 to 10 of where the exceptions to the problem stand in their lives and estimates of future possibilities. The scaling question can be used to further break the problem down into manageable pieces and also to collaboratively monitor progress with the family. Though all family members are struggling, the parents came in because of their concerns about Joe. So at this point, we want to keep the focus on what they are customers for.
I don't know. That's a good question. Now, are you referring to just Joe or to us as a family? Because we're here because Bill and I were very worried about Joe and we don't know what to do anymore.
Yes, I understand that. Your primary worry is Joe. So, okay, where is Joe? Where would you rank him on that 0 to 10 scale?
I guess I would say maybe a 2. I haven't really thought about it that way till now, but I'm very worried about Joe. Actually, I'm very worried about all of us.
How about you, Bill? Where would you rank Joe on that same scale?
I agree with Jane. I would probably put him at a 2 about right now.
Joe, I'd like to hear from you on this. Where are you on that same scale?
Please, Joe, it's important to your father and I to know how you feel about things.
Probably at a 3.
So now I'd like to get a glimpse of what your life might be like if hopelessness was no longer an intruder in your family. To do this, I'm going to ask you a very different question, one that might seem a little strange, but stay with me on this. Suppose that after our meeting today, you go home and go to bed, and while you're sleeping, a miracle happens, one that takes away your problem. It just disappears like magic. The problem is gone. Because you're sleeping, you don't know that a miracle has happened, but when you wake up tomorrow, you feel very different. How will you know that that miracle has happened? What will be the first thing you notice that will tell you that hopelessness is no longer an intruder in your family?
Asking the miracle question is a very useful and creative way for clients to describe their desired future without the problem, which is really a way to do goal setting. However, not only is asking the miracle question helpful in the client setting a well-defined goal, but it is something very new and very different for almost all clients, and thus it is an intervention itself. It is necessary to ask clients follow-up questions to get them to describe the miracle picture as concretely, specifically, and with as many behavioral indicators as possible. Also, it is best to ask the miracle question in a way so the client begins the miracle picture as soon as possible after waking up in the morning. In asking the miracle question in family therapy, address the question to the family as a whole, and then ask follow-up questions of every family member to get them involved in describing the morning and day after the miracle. Involving every family member in this process also creates a thicker description of the miracle picture, and thus helps in co-creating a counterstory and desired change. In this example, externalizing the problem is integrated into the miracle question.
You're right about that being a strange question, but it's a good one. You know, it really makes you think. I think I would notice that Joe is not still in bed asleep.
So, if Joe is out of bed, what is he doing instead?
Well, I think the first thing I would notice is that Joe is already up and out of bed.
And how would you know that? What would you see or hear that would tell you that Joe was up and out of bed?
I would hear him in the shower and getting ready to go to school.
So when Joe is up, out of bed, getting in the shower, getting ready for school, what difference would that make for you?
I would be very, very happy. I don't remember the last time Joe got up on his own.
So when Joe is up on his own, what will others notice in the family that will tell them that you're feeling very happy?
I think they will see me in the kitchen making some breakfast for everyone.
And Joe, how will you know that a miracle has happened during the night while you were asleep in bed?
Do you really want to know?
Yes.
Well, to be honest with you, I would notice that my parents weren't arguing with each other.
So when they're not arguing, what are they doing instead?
Notice that throughout asking the follow-up questions, the therapist uses presuppositional language. That is, the clinician asks the questions in a way that presupposes the miracle will happen or has already happened. Asking questions this way increases the likelihood of the client answering the question in a positive way.
They would already be up in the kitchen together, eating breakfast, drinking coffee, maybe talking about their plans for the day.
So when your parents are doing these things the morning after the miracle, what difference does that make for you?
I guess I would get up and join them in the kitchen.
So what else will you notice that will tell you that a miracle has happened during the night while you were sleeping and that you are standing up to hopelessness?
Mom would make me pancakes because she knows how much I love pancakes, and Dad would show me a comic strip from the newspaper, and maybe we would have a big laugh. You know, we used to do these things all the time.
And how about you, Bill? What will be the first thing you notice the morning after the miracle that would tell you that hopelessness is no longer living in your family?
Well, I do like the idea that Joe would get up on his own and be in the shower getting ready to go to school, and I like the idea that this would make Jane very happy.
And what else would you notice the morning after the miracle?
Well, Jane is always up before me, so I guess I would wake and see her getting ready to go to work, and she would be smiling, and she wouldn't look tired. She looked like she'd have a good night's sleep, and then she would come over and say good morning and give me a kiss on the cheek.
So when Jane is looking relaxed and rested and being affectionate, what difference does that make for you?
Well, it would make me feel good, and I would feel like it's going to be a good day for all of us.
And when they see you, what will they know? How will they know that you're feeling? What will they see you doing that will let them know that you're feeling good and that today is going to be a good day?
Well, I don't. Maybe they'd see me looking at the want ads in the newspaper for work, because I haven't done that for a while. I given that up weeks ago.
Wow. And that's what it sounds like, a very good day. So if your day after the miracle starts off that way, where you're standing up to hopelessness and not letting it take control of you, how do you think the rest of your day will go?
Well, with Joe getting up on his own and getting ready for school, and Bill getting up and having coffee and reading the paper, I feel like a huge weight off my shoulders.
So then when Joe and Bill are doing those things in the morning after the miracle, how do you think the rest of your day will go?
Well, because I won't have to worry about them, I'm sure I'll have more energy and be able to focus on doing my job. You know, maybe even have a few laughs with the customers and my coworkers.
So after a day like that, where you're standing up to hopelessness and your morning has started after the miracle, how do you think your evening will go?
Well, when I come home from work, I won't be so exhausted. And I'll probably have a few stories to tell. I meet a lot of interesting, or at least amusing, people. And we'll have dinner together as a family, which is something we haven't done much in the past several months.
And how about you, Bill? With your morning starting off like this, how do you think the rest of your day will go?
Well, I'd like to say that I would be doing full-time construction work, but as it seems now, for that to happen. A miracle would have really had to happen.
I can understand that. Short of that happening, how will the rest of your day go?
Well, I would be looking for a job. If I couldn't find full-time construction work, I'd probably take any odd jobs or part-time jobs that I could find.
Yes, that makes sense. At the same time, I'm wondering, what would be the first or second thing you would do following having breakfast with Jane and Bill and Joe when Jane has gone off to work and Joe has gone to school?
Well, I probably would be happy that they left feeling okay and we didn't have any struggles or fights that morning.
So after they've gone, what would you do for the first few hours?
Well, I would be relieved that they left feeling okay and I wouldn't have to be worrying about them.
So you're no longer worrying about them and you're feeling relieved. What would you do with yourself for that day?
Well, not really sure. Maybe I would start to straighten up around the house so it wouldn't be so messy when Jane gets home from work. Because, you know, I'd be feeling good and I'd want to do something nice for her. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mean cleaning the house. I just mean maybe picking up a little. Because, you know, it's not fair. Jane works all day and then she has to come home and she has to deal with all the housework herself. I think I would like to help out with that.
Yes. Now that would be a miracle.
So after you've done some straightening up around the house, what would you do next?
Well, looking for a job would still be on my mind. I've looked for construction work every place I can think of. Maybe I need to start looking for another type of work. My buddy Juan suggested that maybe I go to the local branch of the library and ask information about job hunting on the computer. He said he was going to do that, but he hasn't done it yet. And I've looked everywhere else. Maybe there's places I don't know. And you know, a library, they probably should be able to tell me about how to do that, how I can do it on the computer.
Yes, some do provide information with at least finding more information on finding jobs. Joe, what do you think your day would be like following the miracle?
I guess I would be going to school and hanging out with my friends.
Who would be the first person to notice that you're at school?
One way to strengthen exceptions or thicken the alternative storyline is to ask about those who would notice the difference, now or in the future, or others who would recognize the alternative storyline from remembrances about them in the past, current experiences with them, or conclusive predictions for the future based on past ways of knowing them.
It would probably be Betty. She's in my first period English class, and she's my best friend, and she's been asking me why I've been missing school.
Who else would notice that you're in English class?
My teacher, Mrs. Jenkins.
And how would she react?
Well, she would be shocked that I'm there and on time.
Okay. Going back to that 0 to 10 scale, where 0 is where you're filled with hopelessness, and 10 where you're filled with hope. Following the day of the morning of the miracle, where would you rank yourself on that same scale?
The therapist is going back to the scaling question to ask clients to rank their desired goals on the same problem goal continuum on which they ranked the presenting problem.
I would have to say a 6.
Yeah, maybe a 6.
How about you, Joe? Where would you rank the family?
I would say 7.
And where would you need to be on that same 0 to 10 scale where you'd no longer need to come and see someone like me?
A 9.
Yes, I would say a 9.
Probably an 8.
So when you're at an 8 or 9 on that 0 to 10 scale, how will you know it? What will it look like? What else will be different in addition to what happened the morning after the miracle so that you would know that you've reached an 8 or a 9?
Well, I'd have to know that it wasn't just a one-day miracle, but that the changes were permanent. You know, that Joe is no longer feeling depressed, but was feeling hopeful.
What will you see Joe doing that will tell you that he's no longer feeling depressed and now feeling full of hope?
I know Joe would be getting up to go to school every day, just not the day after the miracle.
Yeah. Joe will be back and being interested in his schoolwork again, and his grades will go back to A's and B's, maybe even more A's and fewer B's than before.
And what else will tell you that Joe is no longer feeling depressed and is full of hope?
He'll no longer be isolating himself in his room.
So when he's not isolating himself in his room, what is he doing instead?
Well, he and I will go back to talking to each other like we did before and watching our favorite TV shows together.
Joe, how will you know when you're at an 8 on that 0 to 10 scale after the miracle?
I guess I would be getting myself up in the morning again and hanging out with my friends. Maybe I'd write poetry again.
Is there anything else that would have to happen for you to know that you're at an 8?
Well, I wouldn't see Dad moping around the house all the time.
If he's not moping around the house, what's he doing instead?
Maybe he's doing some yard work or working on repairs for the house. Maybe he won't even be at home.
Well, I appreciate your patience with me as I've been asking you a lot of questions. This is very helpful for me in order to get to know you better, and also for me to get to know better what you want to get out of our work together. I usually take a break for a few minutes to gather my thoughts and jot down some ideas that I'll share with you before you leave. But first, I'd like to talk to Joe. There's one thing I need to check out by himself.
Suicide assessment. At this point, the clinician asks the parents to leave for a few minutes to talk with Joe. The purpose of doing this is to do a suicide assessment. Adolescents who are having suicidal thoughts are more likely to share them with the clinician without the parents in the room. Of course, if the adolescent is having suicidal thoughts, then the clinician must tell the adolescent that she or he must inform the parents. In this case, when the clinician asked Joe about as to whether or not he was having any suicidal thoughts, he replied that he did not. The clinician then brought the parents back into the room and then took a 5-minute break to compose an end-of-session message. The end-of-session message consists of compliments, a task frame, and a between-session task. The therapist uses the break to consult with the team about the session content, family participation, etc. Or if there is not a team behind the one-way mirror, then the therapist reflects on the session herself or himself. The therapist prepares to return to the family with a specific message. This message consists of compliments, a task frame, or what others term a bridging statement that links the session content and the compliments to the between-session task.
First, I want to say that I appreciate your patience with all my questions and your openness in answering them. I'm impressed with your thoughtfulness in responding to my questions. I'm also impressed with how respectful you are with one another. Bill and Jane, it's very clear that you love your son, Joe. And Joe, it's clear that you love your parents as well. I'm also struck with how in tune you are with each other. That is to say, how good you are at noticing how each other is feeling. I'm also impressed with what a good job you did in answering the miracle question. That tells me that you all have good imaginations. Because you are so good at noticing how each other is feeling, and also because you were very good at answering the miracle question, there is something I'm going to ask you to do between now and the next time we meet. Between now and the next time we meet, I want you to just notice when parts of that miracle picture that you did such a good job at describing is happening for you in your life. I want you to notice that, and especially notice when hopelessness is trying to take control, and what you do to tell it not to take control of you. Notice those times when it is happening, and you can either make a mental note or write it down, and we'll share it with each other the next time we meet. Is that something you're all willing to do?
The task here is an observation task. In most other approaches to intervention, clients are asked to notice when the problem is occurring, especially at its worst, and notice the when, where, who, and how of the context. In strength-based approaches, the opposite is done, in that the clients are asked to notice what's going on in their context when the problem is not present, or at least noticeably improved, and also notice what they may be doing to get that to happen. A strengths-based approach to family therapy. The Ohio State University College of Social Work.
It's good to see you again. Tell me how things have been for the past week. As I recall, I asked you to take notice of when moments of the miracle picture happened for you in your life, and you were able to stand up to hopelessness.
I did notice some things being better.
What kind of things?
Well, nothing changed for the first few mornings. But on the fourth morning after our visit here, Joe did get up and out of bed only after one time of me telling him to, instead of 100.
Wow, that is a change. That's good to hear. What else was different this week?
Oh, yeah, on the third morning, Bill got up 30 minutes before I had to leave for work and has been up every morning since then, at least 30 minutes, if not an hour, before I have to leave for work.
That's great. So, let me ask you, Jane, what effect did that have for you?
Well, when I noticed Bill was up and in the kitchen pouring a cup of coffee and then sitting down to read the paper, I decided to join him for coffee and some small talk. We haven't done that in a while, and I really enjoyed that.
Me too, I missed that.
So what else was different?
Well, Bill and I were enjoying ourselves in the kitchen, and before I knew it, it was time to go to work. I didn't have time to spend trying to get Joe out of bed, so I just left for work. And before I left, Bill gave me a kiss goodbye, and that was really nice.
So that was different?
What, hanging out with Bill, the kiss goodbye, or not having time to get Joe out of bed?
Any of those you listed?
Well, there have been a number of mornings when I've ran out of time to get Joe out of bed. So I'd have to say hanging out with Bill and the kiss goodbye. You know, those things used to happen routinely, but we've gotten away from them.
How about you, Bill? What's different from your perspective?
Well, I did notice on the fourth morning, Joe getting up the first time Jane called him to get ready to go to school.
Okay. And Jane mentioned that you got up 30 minutes early on the third morning after our meeting, and that you've been getting up that early ever since.
Yep, that happened.
So I'm wondering, how did you get yourself to do that? To start getting up a little earlier than you have been in the past?
Here, the therapist is elaborating on the exception to emphasize the client's sense of personal agency, or in other words, taking active steps in the reauthoring of a new story.
Well, I'm not really sure. I just woke up and couldn't go back to sleep. Usually I was able to sleep through the alarm that got Jane up, sleep through her getting ready for work, and I guess I could have continued to do that and just lay there in bed while she got ready, but for some reason I just decided to get up.
Is there anything else that's different?
Well, now that you mentioned it, I have started going to bed earlier than usual. Usually, I would stay up long after Jane went to bed to watch TV. But this past week, I've been going to bed soon after Jane did. Maybe that explains why I woke up and couldn't go back to sleep.
Well, that does sound like a new development. Has it been a while since you liked getting up early and seeing what's going on with the family as they begin their day?
It's been a while.
A really long while.
So it's been a long while since you started getting up early, but it's not something that's new to you.
Oh, no. I used to always be the first one up. It's just lately.
Well, I'm wondering if waking up earlier this week reminded you how it used to be before hopelessness disrupted your family.
Sure. It made me feel good. It made me feel like I used to feel in the morning.
And how was that?
You know, ready to get up, start my day, not feeling so sluggish, like I had the energy to get things done. You know, being in construction, you have to get to work early, usually right when the sun's coming up. That's especially true in the summertime, because you have to get up before the summer heat. I used to be one of the first, if not the first one on the job.
So it used to be that you would wake up early when the alarm went off and you would always find the energy to get yourself going. How did this become true for you? You consistently being to work earlier than your coworkers.
The therapist goes after details about the preferred story. He is drawing attention to the ways of being that are preferred by asking action questions that get at describing the behaviors and steps that the father took in order for the other story to be realized. The therapist is emphasizing the self-agency involved on the father's part that cultivates a plot wherein the preferred story is the dominant theme.
Well, I guess when I was in the Army, I was always an early riser, so it just became a habit. And I started construction right after I got out of the Army, so I didn't have time to develop any of these lazy habits. And I just think it's important to get to job on time, especially since I'm one of the older construction workers. I feel a responsibility that I need to be at the job early to make sure the work is getting done, so the younger workers that straggle in late because they've been out the night before partying.
So I'm wondering, how in the past were you able to get up and be ready for the busy day of construction during those times in your life when maybe you were experiencing a personal challenge or something was making you worried? It seems like this might be important information to know.
The therapist continues to deconstruct the problem story by breaking out the details of how father was able to stay focused. This line of questions is referred to as the landscape of action questions. These details of counteraction thicken the alternative storyline or the exception story.
Well, I guess I've always been able to separate the work from the personal stuff.
Yes, it sounds like you were able to do that, but I think it might be more than that. It sounds like somehow you were able to muster up the strength to keep going even when you were facing a personal challenge or there was something in your life that was a struggle or making you tired. I'm curious, how were you able to do that?
I guess you could just say I'm just a really stubborn person.
What do you mean stubborn?
Well, you know, able to get up and get things done even when there's a problem.
How is that? How were you able to stay motivated or focused even when you were facing a personal challenge or something was making you tired?
Well, I guess I always felt that what I was doing was important. What I was doing, I made a contribution, and that I just had to keep going no matter what.
So, Jane, what do you think this says about Bill as a person, that he has this remarkable history of being determined to keep going no matter what?
The therapist begins to strengthen the exception story by interjecting what narrative therapy refers to as the landscape of meaning questions. Meaning questions aim to get at the significance of father's actions brought forth in the alternative story, and what this says about being the kind of person who would conduct his life accordingly.
It says that he's strong and that he's a positive person.
Yep.
Joe, what about you? Your mother and father noticed you were getting up on your own and getting ready for something. Is that how it felt for you?
Well, yeah, I just started getting up and getting ready.
You mean you actually got up on your own and were getting washed and ready for the day?
Yeah, I did.
Well, this sounds like a different story than I have been hearing. What did you do to get this new development to happen?
I don't know. I just started doing it.
The last time we were here, we all talked about what the miracle would look like, and you described yourselves in this miracle scenario and how you had freed yourself from hopelessness. Now I am hearing that pieces of this miracle are actually happening for you and that somehow you are standing up to hopelessness. Joe, what do you think it would take to continue standing up to hopelessness in your life?
I guess I would be determined to not let it control me.
What would it take to be that strong, to not let hopelessness take control of you and of what you're feeling and what you do?
What do you mean?
Well, it sounds like hopelessness has had a very powerful influence in your life. In fact, it sounds like hopelessness has taken over your life. Now, though it has only been for a few days, you have probably needed to be very strong to start standing up to it like you have.
Yeah, I guess you could say something like that. I mean, I haven't thought about it like that, but in some ways it's been really hard to get myself going in the morning, and in other ways it's been really easy. I don't know how quite to explain it.
So now it might be helpful to think of some images of strength that you could draw upon to help you when you're facing hopelessness. What do you think it would take to be strong? What sort of images come to mind for you?
Throughout this portion of the interview, the therapist is engaging in what is called scaffolding in order to construct a frame to support the shift from problem story to possibilities story. The therapist further strengthens the preferred story by drawing on images of strength in standing up to difficult life situations or dominant problem stories.
To be a warrior?
A warrior?
It's this book series I read.
Okay. Now I'm intrigued. What's this warrior like?
He's really tall and strong, and he protects the people of his planet, and he always finds a way to make things better.
And how does he do that?
Well, he takes charge, and he always believes that there's a way to make things better.
How does he do this? He sounds like someone who doesn't give up. And how does he manage not to give up even when things don't look like they're going to work out?
Well, it's just a story, you know. But I would say that it's because he believes there's not a problem he can't solve.
So this person takes charge and shows belief to others. Mom and Dad, do you see a relation between this warrior and Joe?
Again, the therapist draws on action questions and meaning questions to get at the positive qualities and affirming personal identities of the family members as they liberate themselves from the dominance of hopelessness.
Yeah, I do. Joe's always really cared about causes and people.
How do you know this about Joe?
Well, he shows it in his volunteer work and what he writes about.
And what does that say about your son? What kind of person he is?
That he's determined to make things better.
That's him. One of his poems was about feeding the poor no matter what it takes.
Yes, and it sounds like Joe is one of the type of people that believes where there's a will, there's a way. And he has a history of not giving in to hopelessness.
Yeah, one could say that about Joe.
I agree.
So, Joe, I'm getting the impression that for the past several days you've been able to stand up to hopelessness so that it's not taking control of your life. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, you could say that.
And how about you, Jane and Bill? Do you believe that Joe has taken some small steps in standing up to hopelessness so that it's not controlling his life?
I would say so.
Yeah, some small steps.
So, Joe, what effect did it have on you the rest of the day, of those past few days, when you were not letting hopelessness keep you from getting up in the morning and going to school?
Well, I like seeing my parents up before me in the morning, at least on the weekdays, and on the weekends we sleep in some.
Yeah, that goes for all of us.
So what difference does that make for how the rest of your day goes?
Well, I like seeing my friends again at school.
Anything else?
I like not being so far behind in my schoolwork. I know I'm really far behind, but I feel like I can catch up now if I try really hard.
Wow, that's the first time I've heard you say that. I'm really glad to hear that.
Joe, it sounds like for the past few days you have managed to take some small steps towards freeing yourself from hopelessness. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you could say that.
How about you, Bill and Jane? Do you agree that Joe has taken some small steps toward freeing himself from hopelessness?
Further amplifying the exceptions and actions of personal agency, the therapist uses the relationship question to thicken the new plot and amplify change.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, some small steps.
Now, using that warrior image as a model for finding strength and perseverance, what else would be helpful to you in successfully standing up to hopelessness?
Well, seeing my dad up in the morning before I am, or at least about the same time I am.
Joe, I want to ask you to do something, and you can refuse if you feel uncomfortable.
I guess so.
I'd like for you to turn and look at your dad and tell him how important it is for him to be up at the same time, or at least before you do.
Here the therapist is inviting Joe and Dad to do an enactment, a type of intervention unique to structural family therapy. Enactments ask family members to interact with each other in the session in a way that provides an opportunity to make changes in the session. Enactments are also based on the assumptions that clients have skills, strengths, and resources to make the changes they desire. Therefore, the therapist does not teach the clients about how they should talk to each, but does facilitate a process where they feel safe and supported enough to interact with each other differently. In addition, enactments communicate to family members that this calls for changes in the family and not just the person in the family with the presenting problem.
Dad, I realized these past couple days that for some reason I really like it when you're up before me in the morning, or at least about the same time I am.
How is it helpful for you to see your dad in the morning standing up to hopelessness? If that fits for you, tell your dad.
Dad, when I see you up in the morning before I am, it helps me feel like you're fighting hopelessness too.
How is it helpful to you, Joe? Tell your dad.
Dad, I know it's been hard on you because you've been out of work. It's been hard on all of us. But when I see you up in the morning, it tells me that you're fighting hopelessness too, and it makes me feel better.
I hear you, Joe. I'm sorry I let you down. I'll try, but sometimes I just...
It's like Joe's been reading my mind.
Tell Bill that.
Bill, I know you've worked really hard to find construction work. You not having a job is not your fault. Things are close, but we're getting by financially. You're a great guy. A great husband and father, whether you have a job or not.
Thanks. That's good to know.
You know, problems like hopelessness can sneak up on us and take our hope for the future and our energy and our enthusiasm. And in a family, one person can be infected, so to speak. And before long, the entire family is affected. It can be very contagious.
The therapist is further externalizing the problem to communicate that the problem is the problem and that they are not the problem. He is also further underscoring that this is a family situation and not just about one individual family member.
Joe, you also mentioned that it helps you to stand up to hopelessness when both your parents are up in the morning and getting along.
Mom and Dad, when I see you up in the morning hanging out together in the kitchen getting along, it makes me feel like everything's going to be okay. It makes me feel less hopeless.
Well, I started getting up early a few days ago, and there's no reason I should stop it now. I'm going to kick this hopelessness thing. But sometimes it just sneaks up on you and it just takes over.
Yeah, that sounds good to me too.
So getting back to that 0 to 10 scale, Joe, you ranked yourself at a 3 last week. Where would you rank yourself on that 0 to 10 scale today?
The therapist is asking the scaling question to continue to monitor change, which also provides feedback to the family members and the therapist on the family's progress.
Well, at the beginning of today's meeting, I would say that I was at a 4, but now that we've talked, I think I'm at least a 5.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So how about you, Bill and Jane? Last week, you ranked Joe at a 2. Where do you rank him this week on that 0 to 10 scale?
Well, I'm like Joe in that I see things being better today than before we started our meeting. So I would have to say a 5. I would say a 6, but it's only been a few days since Joe started getting up on his own and going to school.
How do you feel, Bill?
I agree. But if he gets up to goes to school every day, that would put him at a 6.
So how will you know when Joe has moved up a point to a 6? What will Joe be doing that will tell you that he has moved up from a 5 to a 6 on that scale and that he's not giving in to hopelessness?
Well, if he continues getting up on his own and going to school like he has been for this past week.
What about you, Bill?
I agree. If he gets up every day and goes to school, that would put him at a 6.
How about you, Joe? Do you agree with your parents?
Well, if I would get up every day and keep going to school, I think that would be at least a 7. I think that would be a huge improvement. And so, no, I don't agree with them on this.
Joe, what do you think would be there in place of hopelessness?
I guess feeling good, like a positive attitude.
You mean like the positive attitude you have that derives from your volunteer work because you're doing something that changes the world?
Yeah, like that.
Outside of your mom and dad, who else knows that you have a history of being a positive person?
The therapist is introducing the idea of seeking other people who can be an audience to the changes reflected in the new story about Joe. This is called an outsider witness in narrative therapy. Having outsiders notice and validate the changes helps consolidate and stabilize them.
I guess some of my teachers at school, there's one especially that says, you're changing the world with all of your volunteer efforts.
What can you do between now and next week to get that to happen? That is for Joe to get up and get to school every day this coming week and stand up to hopelessness.
Well, every morning when the alarm goes off for school, Joe just needs to tell himself that even though he wants to go back to sleep, he's better off getting up and facing hopelessness.
You mean something like telling himself that he's stronger than hopelessness?
Yeah. And showing hopelessness who's the boss.
What about you, Bill?
Well, I agree. I think Joe just needs to tell himself that he's strong and that he needs to go get up and get ready and get to school on time.
So Joe doing that would then indicate that he's turned the corner toward being hopeful, not only about the present, but also the future.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that make sense to you, Joe?
Yeah, I like the idea of being my own boss. I'd be like a warrior if I did that.
What else can you do that would make it possible for Joe to move up 1 point on that 0 to 10 scale?
Well, as we talked earlier, I think it's important that I get up, spend some time with Jane, drinking coffee, reading the paper, hanging out in the kitchen with them. I think that that would not only help me, but it would help Joe and it would help all of us.
So let me ask you, where do you see the family on that 0 to 10 scale in terms of feeling hopeful versus hopeless?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I see us as being at a 5 today.
And what does a 5 mean to you?
Well, given what we've been talking about last week and today, I can now see that we all needed to start talking to each other and listening to each other more. Things have been really tough, and they're going to continue to be for a while. But I know we're going to get through this rough period.
I agree, and it feels good talking about these things.
How will you know when you have moved up 1 point? What will you have to do to get that to happen?
Well, I think just talking to each other and listening to each other more.
I think if I raise my social studies grade from a D to a C, you know, I used to get A's all the time, and I know that I'm far behind, but I feel like I can catch up now.
And I think I'll find myself in the library, looking for jobs on the computer. I've looked for construction work everywhere else, but there's maybe some places that I don't know to look.
Well, I appreciate that all three of you, in your own ways, have become very interested in freeing yourselves from hopelessness. And I'm very impressed that you've been able to move up the 0 to 10 scale by at least 1 or 2 points. That usually takes 3 or 4 sessions for most families, but I'm very impressed that you were able to do that, make that much progress in 1 session. To make that kind of progress, you must really be remembering the ways in which you are standing up to hopelessness, and I'm impressed with some of your ideas of how you're going to continue to do so, not only individually, but as a family. Now, because you came up with some good ideas during the past week and also during our session today, I want to make the following suggestion. For the next week, I would like you to notice when you have moved on the 0 to 10 scale by at least 1 point while standing up to hopelessness. I also want you to pay attention to what you do to make that happen, to stand up to hopelessness. Now, hopelessness will sneak up on you and try and catch you off guard and take the upper hand. Notice what you do to make hopelessness stop that from happening.